All right, good morning, guys. I just wanted to check in because we are about to finish up Lecture 1 materials. I just want to remind you that everything is due tomorrow by 8 o'clock for your test, and then you have until midnight for the activities. This is really weird for me not seeing you guys in person and being able to give you steady reminders or answer your questions in person. Some of you guys have emailed me with questions, and I appreciate you doing that. I hope you guys are finding the Moodle to be user-friendly and easily accessible. So just first off, be sure that you get Lecture 1 test and materials completed by tomorrow, Tuesday, April 2nd. So today, technically, Lecture Test 2 materials have been opened, but really I don't want you working too far ahead. I want to make sure that you're spending time or an appropriate amount of time on your lecture materials. But I did want to just shoot you this quick video over Lecture Test 2. So after you've done Lecture Test 1, you kind of know the ropes. I think the first test can sometimes be the most difficult because you don't know what to expect. But I just want to remind you that everything you need is on Moodle. There's very specific details about what you are expected to know, and then the way the Moodles are laid out, there's lots of materials to help you learn and understand that material. So for Lecture Test 2, it's also going to be focusing on 2 chapters. We're going to have Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. This time I want you to note there is a small change. The due date is on a Monday. The only reason the first unit was a Tuesday was because we started on a Tuesday. But from here on out, pretty much all of your due dates, with the exception of the final exam, they're going to be on a Monday. And so your next important due date is going to be Monday, April 7th. And once again, the tests are going to be expected to be completed by 8 o'clock that night. If you take it in the testing center, you're going to have to get there at least an hour in advance. You must get there by 7 o'clock. Or if you're taking it on the Respondus Lockdown browser, it'll shut down at 8 p.m. So you want to make sure that you get that test done in plenty of time and not take it too last minute. Now, all of the assignments that go along with the lecture test materials are going to be due at midnight on April 7th. But as always, I would highly recommend not doing those after you take the test. You really need to get those done before you take them. So Chapter 3 is a review of basic biology concepts. Chapter 4 goes over tissues. So what we're seeing is kind of a progression. So in Chapter 1, we learned about the organization of life, how that atoms make up molecules and compounds, and then those go on to make up macromolecules, which make up organelles, and then the cells. Cells make up tissues, tissues make up organs, and organs make up organ systems. And so what we're seeing so far is a progression. So Chapter 2 was a focus on the chemistry level. We talked about atoms and molecules and macromolecules. And then the next step in that progression are going to be organelles and cells. And so really, Chapter 3 is focusing on that cellular level of organization. And you're going to see these terms, both in chemistry and basic biology, you're going to see a lot of these concepts popping up all throughout A&P 1 and A&P 2, because as we go into the systems, we're going to be looking at organs that are made up of tissues that are made up of cells. And then, of course, cells have smaller parts. So it's definitely a good foundational type of chapter that you need to understand well. Okay, so there's a lot of different concepts under the biology realm. Okay, I was a biology teacher for 20 years, and so it was really hard to kind of summarize some of these very technical concepts. But what you need to know is just kind of like the basic background of cellular biology. And then Chapter 4 is moving up to that next level of organization. So cells working together make up tissues. And Chapter 4 is going to focus on the 4 main tissue types: epithelial, connective, nervous, and muscular. And so these 2 chapters are just a continuation. Both of these are still kind of backup. It's not until Lecture Test 3 that we get into our actual systems. So I want to start by taking a look at the things to know. Okay, you have this in your packet, or you also have access to this on your Moodle page. So that's where I pulled this up from. And so your things to know for chapters 3 and 4. So once again, for every test, you're going to have a matching section for word bits. So these are important prefixes or kind of roots of words that you need to know. A lot of these you will see multiple times. So this is just a memorization thing. So I would encourage you to maybe make some flashcards, but definitely know your word bits. You're going to have at least 2 questions where you're having to match your word bits. And then we get into the objectives. And as always, I would encourage you to not try to do too much in one sitting. Try to break it up into smaller parts. So for chapter 3, you have the cell theory. There's quite a large section on the cell membrane. You have the organelles. And when we look at essays here in a minute, one possible essay is about the structure of the cell membrane. One possible essay is about your organelles, okay? And so by knowing these objectives, you're also preparing for your possible essays. Once again, they should be points that you get on your test because you know what to expect, okay? So I would definitely prepare for those essays in advance. You don't know which 2 you'll get, but you definitely know what you could see on the test. You're going to take a look at DNA replication, the cell cycle, and protein synthesis. And so really this terms to know here, all of these terms are going to be covered in your PowerPoint, okay? Moving on to chapter 4, here's our objectives here. So you need to know the 4 main tissue types. There's an essay involving the 4 main tissue types. You've got some membranes that you need to learn. Then once we kind of go over the basics of the 4 main tissue types, it goes into some detail on each one. So there's a section about epithelial tissue and their characteristics, connective tissue and their characteristics, muscle tissue and their characteristics, and then nervous tissue and its characteristics. Now, a couple of your other essays come from some specifics that you'll find in your tissues, okay? So down here's our possible essay questions. There is one correction that I want to make. On number 4, when it says the 4 structures found in a neuron, that is actually chapter 4, okay? That is a tissue question. So you will find that under the nervous tissue. You also have some handouts in your packet that can help you prepare for that neuron. And then we're going to talk about the packet here in just a moment. So number 1, what are the 4 components of the cell membrane? You will find this in chapter 3 under the section about the cell membrane. Number 5, list 5 organelles. We go over more than 5. You just have to choose 5. And so you name the organelle and state their function. If you are taking lab right now, you have to know those same parts for lab. Number 3, the difference between hypertonic, hypotonic, and isotonic. This is also going to be under kind of the cell membrane section where we talk about transport. We talk about passive transport and active transport. And one section focuses on osmosis, which is the movement of water. And it is with osmosis that we use these terms to describe solutions. So this one can also be found in chapter 3 in the cell membrane portion, okay, when we're talking about transport. Number 4, the 4 structures found in a neuron. Once again, that is actually chapter 4. And you will find the 4 main parts of the neuron and their functions under the nervous tissue. The 4 main tissue types and 2 characteristics of each. That is actually pretty much the whole set of notes on your tissues. We list the 4 main types, your epithelial, connective, nervous, and muscle. And then there's a section over each one that you could use for your 2 characteristics of each. And then the last one is a specific type of tissue question. It's about muscle tissue. And there are 3 types of muscle tissue. You have skeletal muscle, you have cardiac muscle, and you have smooth muscle. So this one is focusing specifically on muscle tissue, and you will find that in the muscle tissue section. All right, so that wraps up our things to know. And then I just wanted to go over a couple of things about your handouts. So for the most part, they kind of have the same basic layout, and that each lecture unit kind of starts off with the things to know. Each lecture unit contains what are called like pre-class questions. Now, a lot of these things may have been created when there was a 16-week course, but I just want you to understand that while they're not required, those are some very helpful materials. So if you have the textbook or you downloaded it, you could use the textbook to do those pre-class notes. And you don't have to do them before you do the notes, but all of those are just practice, practice, and more practice, okay? So in the handouts, you'll find the pre-class notes, you'll find the in-class questions. Those are kind of embedded in your PowerPoints. Sometimes there's some helpful diagrams that you can use, or just various things to help you practice some of these objectives, okay? So if you haven't really gone through some of those materials, I would encourage you to take a look at them. Now remember, Miss Grisham is the one who created these, and in class, Miss Grisham does a lot of drawing. I don't necessarily teach that same way. I kind of use the pictures that are in the notes. But sometimes you'll come across some blank pages, and those blank pages are from Miss Grisham. Sometimes these are going to be found on the Moodle, and sometimes they aren't. But just know that those blank pages, if anything, you could always use them for a practice sheet, okay? So even though we may not be drawing on them, you could use them as a way to practice some of that content. All right, now I want to go back to the Moodle. So we've talked about our things to know. Okay, once again, we have our notes. And again, I posted a document that has some videos. So here's Chapter 1 notes. There's the fill in the blank handouts, or Chapter 3, I'm sorry. Chapter 3 notes, Chapter 3 note handouts, if you'd like to use them. And then this document here is just a bunch of video links, okay? Once again, not required, not something you have to do, but sometimes if you just find that maybe you're struggling, sometimes there's a lot of videos that can be very helpful. Now, like I said, I taught biology for like 20 years, and Amoeba Sisters, while they can be a little bit annoying, okay, they are very good about going over basic biology concepts. They cover it at a level that I think is appropriate for what you need to know for this chapter. And so there's several videos that could help you review some of the content on Chapter 3. Okay, so each of these is a video. They're all under 10 minutes. Most of them are anywhere from 6 to 8 minutes, depending on the topic. So here's a possible sheet that could help you kind of understand biology concepts a little bit better. And then, let's see, going back. I did the exact same thing for Chapter 4, okay? There's a document that has some videos that may be helpful with tissues. It's not necessarily Amoeba Sisters, but there's lots of good materials out there on YouTube, videos that can be short and sweet with great visuals. And so here you have your PowerPoint, there you have the fill in the blank note sheet, and there you have a document that has some video links. Of course, you have your lecture recordings. You can use those to fill in your notes if you're using those fill in the blank handouts. You have lots of study materials. Some of these are handouts that are in your packet. Some of these, like in this particular chapter, there's in Chapter 3, there's a video that has a handout with it. You'll find that in your packet. And so there's a video that you can watch to kind of fill it out about the cell membrane. That could be helpful to you. You have some more study materials in Chapter 4. Remember, none of this is required, but highly encouraged that you take a look at some of these things. You have some practices, okay? The more practices you do, the more exposure you get to possible questions, okay? Really, I will tell you that if you're really struggling, I would not just rely on reading notes to study. The best thing you can do is practice, practice, and more practice. You can read and read and read and read and not necessarily understand anything. So how do you know if you're understanding what you're reading? You have to test yourself, okay? So here's some practice quizzes that you can take. Then all of these are just some short, quick questions over each objective. And so they have the answers with them, so it could just be a quick way to test yourself. You have a practice test. If you're not doing those, I would encourage you to do them before you take the actual test. And then, of course, you have your graded activities. So these are the materials that have to be turned in by midnight on the due date, which is April 7th for this unit. So you have another video to watch. Be sure you submit. You have a Chapter 3 quiz and a Chapter 4 quiz. And then, of course, you have your two options for taking the test. You can take the test in the testing center, or you can take the test at home on your home computer using the Respondus Lockdown browser. And that wraps up our overview for Lecture 2 materials. If you guys have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask. And once again, I would encourage you, you are more than welcome to come and see me up here at the college. I know that this is a web course, but if you are able and you need help, feel free to let me know when you're coming. We can make an appointment, we can set aside time, and you're more than welcome to come up here and see me face to face and go over anything that you might need help with, okay? I feel kind of weird not having students in person, so feel free to come and visit if you need help with anything. And that's all I have for today. I hope you guys have a great week, and hopefully I will talk to you soon.